Welcome to My Writer's Room. I'm BT Higgins. Welcome to Lesson 5.5. We're going to continue with our study of the different kinds of genre. Genre are the different categories or styles of writing that you can use. Different people like different styles, and so when you choose your genre, you're choosing your audience, okay? Today's genre is historical fiction. It is a literary genre in which the plot takes place sometime in the past. Although the term is commonly used as a synonym for historical novel, it can also be applied to other kinds of story, like theater, opera, cinema, TV, video games, graphic novels. Basically, any form can be a historical fiction. It doesn't just have to be a historical novel. Just because I write novels doesn't mean that's the only way to tell stories. You can tell stories in many different ways. But basically, historical just means the setting or the place is a real place in the past, which means in order to write this kind of story, you need to do research to what was life like, let's say, in the Roman era, or what was life like in the Bible era. What was it like in ancient China? What was it like during World War II in Hawaii before the bombing of Pearl Harbor? You have to do the research to figure out how life was, how people talked, how people thought. The more recent history is easier to learn about. Ancient history gets to be where it's more challenging, but a lot of people have studied these things, and so you can find information about these times and set your stories there. Now, this is interesting if you like to learn about time periods and learn about history and get really good at one time period so you kind of know it and feel it, but there's a lot of challenge in it because you kind of have to get it right. If you say you're in the Roman era and then suddenly you have guns and cannons, what? They didn't have guns and cannons in the Roman era. So you have to get all the details right, and it doesn't even have to be that big of a mistake. It can simply be the style of the coins they use or the places where they lived. Well, there was no city there. You have to get your bits right. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get everything right. You can be writing based on what you know. But if you ever want to get to the point where you're publishing for a wide audience in historical fiction, you gotta do your research. You got to get it right. Now, one thing that I'm doing with my Island Chronicles series is I'm kind of inventing an alternate history. What if the world was different in these ways? Kind of a historical fantasy. And if it was, then it would have some of the things of the past, and I'm pulling from history in different places, and it would have some of the things that are from our present. And I'm doing a kind of a mishmash of that. Now, I don't know if that makes it historical fiction at all, but one of the subgenres of historical can be like alternate history. Like, what if John F. Kennedy hadn't been assassinated? What if Columbus had never discovered the Americas? What if alternate history? Okay? And there's a lot of things you can do with alternate history. But if you're doing straight historical fiction, you need to get the pieces right. Now, those pieces will fall into 7 basic categories, and these are basic categories of stories. You got to get the characters right. They have to think like someone and talk like someone who lived at that time period. It's awfully weird when someone from history has the mindset of like someone who is a modern person. In fact, sometimes historical novels are criticized because the characters are doing something that we now find to be horrible. But back then it would have been normal, and so they criticize it as if those people were horrible. But they're judging history by modern standards. But and so it's the people get upset about that. But if it's going to be real, the characters have to be living in that time. And so you got to know how they should talk, how they should act, how should they interact, what are the rules that the characters have to follow. How the dialogue is important. But you don't want it to be 100% like they're back then. Because if you're talking about Shakespeare, they have to talk like Shakespeare all the time. Well, that's going to be difficult to read and very difficult for you to write. But you can give little flavors of that time period with some expressions and some words that are from olden times, and then some that's modern so that we can understand it better. If you're the next element of historical fiction is the setting. You have to have the setting be accurate. Where was the river? Where was the town? How was that related to the other places that were there, and what kind of businesses and what kind of lifestyle did they live? All the things around the story have to be accurate to the place in history and the way that it really was. The themes, every novel has a theme. You have to have themes that fit with that time period. People in that time period might not be interested or concerned or anything with the things we're concerned with. And so the theme needs to fit the time. The plot has to fit the time. The conflict, the world building. These are all characteristics of novels in general, but you have to have all these characteristics in line, and that means you got to do a lot of research. Now, if you're just writing some little short story in history, you don't have to do all that research. But just learn a little bit about it and what it was like, and maybe a little bit what their clothes was like, and then go for it. It's not that complicated. It's not that strict. The bigger the piece that you want to do, the more you need to know, so that you don't just write modern novel set in ancient Greece. You see what I mean? Unless, of course, you're trying to break all the rules. And so you put a modern novel in ancient Greece just to say that you could. So, all right. So that's a little bit of what I want you to think about. One author for you to read who did a lot of really great historical novels is Scott Odell. He wrote the novel Island of the Blue Dolphins, which I really loved. He also wrote some other ones. King's Fifth is another one that I remember from his, but I've read like 4 or 5 of them. A lot of like history from California and Mexico. So those are an author to check out if you want to read some historical fiction. There's also like Laura Ingalls Wilder and some others that did great historical fiction. There's tons of them. But if you enjoy reading it, then you might also enjoy writing it. All right? All right.